Acronyms, the coming destiny of mankind. Good evening and welcome to a Cepher Moments presentation from Cepher Publishing Group. I'm Stephen Pidgeon, and tonight we're going to be talking about acronyms, the coming destiny of mankind. And we'll be discussing this from a prophetic view as well as a current events view as to what is on the table as we speak. And we're going to be taking a closer look at this. And I want to welcome everybody to this program tonight. For those of you that are new to this channel, please recognize that virtually all of the videos that are created on this channel are retained and can be found on the Cepher.net website, CEPHER.net website. Just go there and go under media and you will find all of these videos. And we also have supporting PDFs of the PowerPoint presentations that are being used for these productions. And so I want to welcome everybody in the subscriber chat here tonight and the new viewers to this channel. Remember, if you want to engage in the chat, you want to make sure that you subscribe because it is a subscriber-only chat that kind of keeps out problematic comments. And so I'm looking forward to being with all of you people tonight. Thank you. Good to see a lot of our friends from Canada here, including Pauline Buffalo Bull Lodge. Hi, Pauline. Good to see you here. I'm glad you're here. Give my greetings to your husband and to the whole crew there. And I want to welcome everyone else, Debbie Johnson, Tina Agundez, James Hilly, Thabo Lesibo. Yes. Hi, Eileen. Good to see you here. 6079 Smith, Pat Ladd, Rain Crusett. Hi, Rain. Sherry Papin. Blessings. Hi, Ashton. Good to have you here. Joy Redeman. Yes. Beautiful. Hi, Catherine Hayes. And the Chicken Man is here. Yes. Okay. And Christine Pierce. Hi, Christine. Glad you're here. And Tony Wright is also here. I'm glad you're here, Tony. And good morning to you. Hope you have a good breakfast this morning. I know it's quite a bit later there in the UK. And I want to thank you, brother, for being a strong voice in the midst of trouble in the UK. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight too. But we've got a lot to talk about tonight. So I'm going to get into this presentation immediately. Okay. So here we are. Acronyms, the coming destiny of mankind. We begin with a verse that Shel Wagner has already put into the chat. And hi, Shel Wagner. Glad you're here. And Judy Keel, glad you're here. Sherry Salama, prayers for you. And glad you're here. And Euphrasia, hi, Euphrasia, glad you're here. Ashley Bruni, yes. So happy you guys are all here with us. And Ron Elston, of course. Hey, Ron, great brother, man. Glad to see you here. Okay. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is chi stigma. Well, fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. All right. Let's explore this just a little bit. The letters chi, stigma do appear in the original text, i.e. the Stephanus Textus Receptus, and have only been retained in the Cepher. Virtually all other scriptures revert to 660 and 6, or some just 666 for these three letters. Virtually all other scriptures defer to the imputed gematria of the Greek language, assigning 660 and 6 respectively to the letters. But that does not actually appear there, but is both an imputation and a substitution, which of course we're told at the end of Revelation, no one is ever supposed to do. And so here we can see the Greek here, which reads, I'm going to try to read this, it's a little tough for me, Hode hi Sophia estin o echan ton vun, and this is sifizzato, like psychology, sifizzato, ton, and arithmon, ton, therian, arithmos, gar, anthropon, estin kai o arithmos, auto chi si stigma. Okay, so that is the Greek Textus Receptus right there. And for those of you that are looking, you can see that this here appears in the original Greek text. This is what has been retained in the Cepher, these three letters, chi, si, stigma, which is not a translatable word. And so as a consequence, we can understand it as an acronym. As an acronym. Well, maybe. Let's look. Does this acronym chi, si, stigma have any meaning? Well, consider this Greek word, Christos. You might recognize this word as this is the word that is commonly translated as what? Christ, right? It's commonly translated as Christ. Christos, Christos, right? But we see the key here. Wait, let me get a little darker color here. We see the key here, and we see the final sigma or stigma here. Okay? This is the letter that's a question. Now, this is the original sigma, not final sigma, but that's not what we see in the mark, right? We see something different there. Well, here we see the letters chi, sigma, and stigma or final sigma. What is the nature of the G in the middle, right? And this is this letter here, right? What is the nature of that? It is the mark of a false Mashiach, an antichrist, if you will, in the vernacular. So this mark is signifying an antichrist. It is a mark that's like Christos, only different. Only different. Okay. Here is wisdom. Let him that has understanding calculate the number of the beast. That was that Physatakos. This was this number, this calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is chi stigma. So calculate. Now, this does not mean, calculate does not mean simply assign a gematria. That's not calculating the number. That's just assigning a gematria to the number. That's not calculating anything to the Greek letters, but to do some form of calculation. All right, well, let's just stop here for a minute and think about it. We've got really kind of four kinds of simple forms of calculation we could do. We could do addition. Now, if we do addition, we've got 660 and 6, which is going to give us what? 666. All right, that's not much of a calculation. That's not much different than just more or less a restatement of that. If we minus it, we get 540 minus 6. We get, 534. What's 534? I don't know. Doesn't have a lot of meaning. What if we divide the 600 by 60? If we divide the 600 by 60, we get 10. We divide the 10 by 6. Then what do we get? We get a 0.333. All right. But what if we multiply them? Well, we'll get to that. Let's see here. Consider the speculative work of Watson and Crick. In 1953, James Watson and Francis Crick built the first correct structural model of DNA. They used scale models of atoms to work out their theories about how the structure was set up. When they discovered how the base pairs adenine fit together with thymine and guanine fit together with cytosine, they knew they had found a solution to DNA's structural puzzle. The DNA model built by Watson and Crick and the accompanying paper published in Nature showed how DNA's base pair structure is suited for the copying of genetic material. In 1962, they, along with Maurice Wilkins, received the Nobel Peace Prize for physiology for their work. This is from Exploring Nature, Science Education Resources, Watson and Crick's great discovery, the structure of DNA. Okay. All right. And continuing on in that same treatise, we find this. On April 24, 2003, scientists at the National Human Genome Research Institute, the NHGRI, and the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, announced that they had completed the sequencing of the human genome. 50 years to the day that Nobel Prize winners James Watson and Francis Crick published the molecular structure of the DNA double helix. Now, this is the language used in their report, okay? This is not my language. This is their language describing the double helix, okay? The decoding of the 3 billion DNA letters of the human genome is the result of one of the most ambitious scientific projects of all time, comparable to going to the moon, right, and the splitting of the atom. Now, you may disagree with the going to the moon, but it's hard to deny nuclear bombs. This amazing achievement was accomplished by the International Human Genome Sequencing Consortium and included hundreds of scientists at 20 sequencing centers in the United States, Great Britain, China, France, Germany, Japan, and China. Everybody was in on it. All right, so this was a big deal. And now, at the NIH website of all places, the NIH website for the National Library of Medicine, PubMed section, the following group of authors reached an interesting determination in the published essay entitled The Characterization of 20 Sequenced Human Genomes. This is Kimberly Pilak, Kevin Viciana, Dongliang Gi, Jessica Maya, Mingfu Zhu, Jason P. Smith, Elizabeth T. Cerulli, Jacques Filet, Samuel P. Dixon, Curtis E. Gums, Aaron L. Heinzen, Anna Sinead, Elizabeth Ruzzo, Albanish Singh, C. Ryan Campbell, Linda K. Hong, Katerina A. Lawrenson, Alexander M. McKenzie, Nara L. M. Sobriera, Julie E. Hoover Fong, Joshua D. Milner, Ruth Ottman, Barton F. Haynes, James N. Goddard, and David B. Goldstein. Goldstein. Yeah, very interesting group of scientists. And this is from the article, The Characterization of 20 Sequenced Genomes, published on PubMed at NCBI. And I have the link here in the PowerPoint. You can see it. In this article, the following abstract is published. Now, this is their abstract, okay? This is what they said. We present the analysis of 20 human genomes to evaluate the prospects for identifying rare functional variants that contribute to a phenotype of interest. We sequenced at high coverage 10 case genomes from individuals with severe hemophilia A and 10 control genomes. We summarize the number of genetic variants emerging from a study of this magnitude and provide a proof of concept for the identification of rare and highly penetrant functional variants by confirming that the cause of hemophilia A is easily recognizable in this data set. We also show that the number of novel single nucleotide variants discovered per genome seems to stabilize at about 144,000 new variants per genome after the first 15 individuals have been sequenced. Okay? They stabilize at 144,000 new variants. Okay? Confirmation of the Watson and Crick discovery. In an article published in the New York Times, and this, now if you recall, let me go back here to this just one moment. Let's see. Let's go back and look at this. This article here, The Characterization of 20 Sequenced Human Genomes, was published on September 9th, 2010. Now, if we look here, we've got an article that was published on September 23rd, 1999, 11 years earlier. Okay? In an article published in the New York Times entitled Count of Human Genes is put at 140,000, a significant increase. Nicholas Wade admits that, quote, a new calculation of the number of human genes puts the total far higher than previous estimates by the rug liars before that, meaning that the human organism is considerably more complex than hitherto expected. The new estimate by Insight Pharmaceuticals of Palo Alto, California, sets the number of human genes at 140,000. That's an estimate, plus or minus 4,000, right? Plus or minus 4,000. All right. Now, this is a New York Times article, by the way. It's entitled Count of Human Genes is put at 140,000, a significant increase, by Nicholas Wade on September 23rd, 1999. And again, I have the link right here in the PowerPoint. Okay, given the observations of the scientists at the National Human Genome Research Institute, the NHGRI, and the U.S. Department of Energy, and the form of the DNA determined by Nobel Prize winners James Watson and Francis Crick to be a double helix, the two strands of the DNA then exhibit 72,000 genes per helix. A fallen messenger creating a duplicate RNA would be required, therefore, to duplicate a 72,000 gene pattern, creating a triple helix DNA. Okay, now you can see here, we can see the hydrogen bond, strand 1, the Hoogsteen base pairing, and strand 3. So this is showing 2 strands and a strand 3 using the Hoogsteen base pairing. Well, a triple helix DNA refers to a DNA structure where 3 strands of DNA wind around each other, forming a helix, with the 3rd strand binding to the major groove of a standard DNA double helix, often through the Hoogsteen base pairing. This structure is considered a potential mechanism for regulating gene expression by binding to specific DNA sequences and potentially interfering with transcription. Interesting. This is what the 3rd helix is capable of, right? Potential mechanism for regulating gene expression. Let's calculate the number of the triple helix, can we? 72,000 genes plus 72,000 genes plus 72,000 genes in a triple helix, 216,000 genes. Now let's calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. 600 times 60 times 6, 216,000. Interesting. While some say the triple helix is impossible in human DNA, consider the writing of Gulong Wang and Karen M. Vasquez of September 1st, 2004, in their article entitled Naturally Occurring HDNA, that's a triple helix, HDNA, Forming Sequences Are Mutagenic in Mammalian Cells, published on PNAS. Quote, our findings suggest that HDNA is a source of genetic instability resulting from DSBs and demonstrate that naturally occurring DNA sequences are mutagenic, that is, something capable of causing permanent changes in the DNA in mammals, perhaps contributing to genetic evolution and disease. Okay, so you have something saying here that mutations via a triple helix are in fact possible and observable. And they find that, okay? This was published, again, in 2004, and it can be found at www.pnas.org. And I give the site for it down here at the bottom of this particular slide. But the key, see, stigma is not the only acronym certain to affect the destiny of mankind, but rather the proposals of those controlling the world now in an unbridled tyranny that governs with few traces of democracy and in many cases completely contrary to the will or the consent of the governed. Now, this is the case, and I'm going to express this tonight so that we know. There is an underlying tyranny going on in the world whose names cannot be mentioned, whose leaders cannot be mentioned, and yet they are governing from a position of weakness, okay, not strength, weakness. They're governing from a position of weakness. They have a lot of buffoonery going on, and they've got a lot of lip service going on, but they do not have the kinetic means to sustain themselves any longer. They can't do it any longer. And this group is housed primarily out of London, but it is in a coalition with London, Basel, Switzerland, the Vatican and Rome, Davos, Switzerland, Brussels, Belgium. It is this coalition of people that have gathered together and who work against interest of the whole world to create a digital techno-fascism that we're going to discuss the parameters of it now. And they've been very open about it with their spokesperson, Klaus the Mop Schwab, and his counterpart, as far as I'm concerned, the most evil man currently living, at least according to his mouth, which is Noah Yuval Harari. And these two have come together to be the spokespersons of the World Economic Forum and to say, we're going to own nothing and be happy about it. We're going to eat bugs while they can continue to control the substantial wealth of the world by means of their rhetoric and by no other means, because they are highly disfavored in the world now. The global south is rising and is rejecting the colonialization of the European continent. And that includes both South America and Africa, which has really had enough of colonization. But it also includes Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, who've also had enough of colonization. And the chief agents that are opposing colonization now is rising China and rising Russia. Of course, this group of leaders in Europe intend to hold on to their power and authority, and the only way they can do it right now is to defeat Russia in a kinetic war, and they do not have the means to sustain this war, or to win it, or to even overcome even the slightest battle, as they are about to completely capitulate in Ukraine, meaning that Russia is going to be able to rise to the kind of victory that has just been experienced by Hamas in Israel. And so we can see that you can expect a great cry of jubilation, if you will, that's going to take place. But in the meantime, what they have planned for us with this group of non-democratic, now look, let me explain to you how non-democratic they are, okay? Emmanuel Macron was voted out of office. He only had one county in all of France supporting him, which was Paris. Everybody else in the country voted for Marine Le Pen. He refused to change the government, and who could do anything about it? Olaf Scholz in Germany, he's going to be ousted. The government has completely collapsed, yet they refused to replace the government with the AfD leadership, which is the democratic preference in Germany. The preference in Britain has been the Reform Party, yet Labour took the helm of the ship under Keir Starmer. Now, Keir Starmer has been disinvited to the Trump inauguration. He's not invited to show up there. And the Keir Starmer government has come under intense criticism from Elon Musk, as has Emmanuel Macron, as has the government in Germany, as has Ursula von der Leyen, who is the managing agent of the Fourth Reich, i.e. the EU. And the Fourth Reich and the government of the Schengen region is all governed by heirs of the Third Reich, who reunited the continent under the same basic principles of the Reich. Only now they have really huge problems because their adventurism in NATO to attempt to destroy Russia, which, here you have Russia, the largest nation on earth, being challenged by Britain, one of the smallest nations on the continent of Europe, and who, by the way, has the smallest army. I think there's only 40,000 people left in the British Army. But that doesn't stop the Brits from agitating with the British Foreign Office, i.e. MI6, and 007s all over the world that are agitating and causing massive destruction at very key places in Russia. For instance, it was the British Foreign Office that was responsible for the sinking of the Moskva, which was a ship belonging to Russia that was sunk in the Black Sea. They were responsible for the strikes on the Kerch Bridge. They were responsible for the strike on the submarine that was in dry dock. They were responsible for the strikes that came into Kursk and into Tula and some of the other deep strikes into Russia using storm shadows that were guided by British agents. And they were also responsible for spearheading the attack into the Kursk region to actually invade Russia. And to invade Russia with a hopelessly understaffed army, an underarmed army, which has now been essentially all completely wiped out. So what's happening right now in Ukraine is that Ukraine launched again on the behest of the British Foreign Office, launched major strikes deep into Russia, in the Bryansk region, into Tula, and into Kazan, using again deep strike weapons like the Storm Shadow or the Taurus. And these missiles came in, and the Russians said, okay, well, here's what's going to happen to you. And so the Russians have essentially shut down the entire electric grid of all of Ukraine now. So everybody in Ukraine is in the dark. Does this stop Zelensky from saying, well, we're going to go ahead and draft 18-year-olds and send them up to the front, even though he's got at least 1.3 million dead and probably 3 million casualties? This is not stopping him from sacrificing the last Ukrainian to the will of the British Foreign Office. And by the way, to whom Biden was in complete obedience. Okay. So we can see that this particular kind of leadership. Now, the 8 oligarchs from Ukraine who owned multi-million, and we're talking multi-million, you're talking anywhere $20, $40, $50 million pads in Pacific Palisades, all 8 of those lost their homes in the fires of Pacific Palisades, all 8 of them. And so this is kind of a sign to Vladimir Zelensky, when you go to retire from Ukraine, which I expect to have happen in the next month or two at the latest. But don't go to Miami because they can get to you there. So you might want to think about your mom's house in Egypt, or maybe you can get some protection from the Turks on the island of Cyprus, where your $200 million casino is. But and take your wife's Bugatti with you when you leave. And so, at any rate, Ukraine holds the promise of a complete collapse. And the next proposition is whether or not the British Foreign Office can force Romania, who just had a fair election, which put in a fellow named Georgescu. Georgescu said, we're not going to do any more of this war against Russia. In fact, we don't want any more NATO involvement in here at all. We want out. So the leadership in Europe, which is not democratic, okay, it's very important to understand. The leadership in Europe is not democratic. They don't allow the people to choose their leaders. So they voided the election in Romania and said, you're not in here anymore. You're not our guy, so you don't hold office anymore. We're going to go ahead and hold another election because we're so in favor of democracy. They're not. They've completely suspended democracy in favor of a closet tyranny, a tyranny from a crown that cannot be seen, a nameless, faceless entity that is governing Europe and has got complete control over what happens in the leadership in Germany, in France, in Bulgaria, in Romania. Even the recent attempted assassination of Fico in Slovakia, which failed, by the way, because he survived it. Fico's a very stand-up guy. And Fico and Orban, both of whom have been invited to the Trump inauguration, have taken stand-up positions against the tyranny of the EU. But the EU is no longer a democratic institution, just as Joe Biden converted the United States to a non-democratic entity. I got to make sure that you guys understand this. Joe Biden did not seize the presidency by democratic means. He can call himself a Democrat all day long. That party stands for bureaucrat, not Democrat, and they have no intention of allowing you to vote for anything. They're going to install themselves because in their mind, they think they are smarter than the masses. The masses are asses, and therefore they should have no right to vote in the people they want to have in because the elite are so much smarter than them. They're so much smarter. They know the real people to put into office, and they know the people that have to be excluded, the ones that don't understand the bureaucracy. They know those people. And so therefore, those people, the ones who love the bureaucracy, they have to be reelected. The ones who don't are ignorant, stupid people. Well, let me just say this to you bureaucrats that stole the last election. You guys were wrong, weren't you? You're not smarter. You're dumber. You're stupid. You're idiots. You're fools. And guess what? You proved it. You took us to the brink of nuclear war over the last 3 years. You completely destroyed the American economy. You destroyed our foreign policy. You destroyed our alliances. You destroyed our prestige. You destroyed American hegemony worldwide. You destroyed all the relationships in the Middle East. You guys did that. You destroyed this nation like no other group of people ever. And you're calling yourself smart? You're not. You are the dumbest bricks on the wall, okay? And you've proved it. It's not just a question. You proved it. $36 trillion deficit shows you proved it. You proved how poor you are at decision making. So sit down and shut up, and don't you ever rig another election again. Because you don't know what you're doing. You're stupid people. You're ill-informed ignoramuses with a big ego trip who knows nothing. Okay, so when we talk about this, these anti-democratic forces are still at war with the country. Arguably, well, I won't go there because I want this video to stay up. All I can tell you is this, that I'm going to go into the acronyms now, and we're going to be talking about what their goals are for the United States. And let me explain this to you so you know. The Deagle report forecasts that the United States is only going to have 90 million to 100 million people by the end of 2025. This means that somebody somewhere has it in their mind to reduce the population of the United States from 340 million down to 100 million. That's 240 million dead between now and the end of the year. Okay, so what's that look like to you? To me, that looks a lot like war. That's what it looks like to me, war. And because they're at war with us with the intent of killing us. And they're going to do it not by kinetic means, although they may get the kinetic means if they can talk somebody into nuking us which they did everything they could possibly do to get Russia to nuke us since November of 2024. They did everything they could do to cause Russia to nuke the United States. But slow hand Luke over there in Moscow, Vladimir Putin, said, I'm not doing that. Why? Why? Because look, the Russians understand one thing that Benjamin Netanyahu does not, which is that emotions are not a tool of cognition. Okay, so try to understand that, particularly when you're a political leader. You can't sit there and get inflamed and get angry and decide you're going to act out of your anger. Nope, no, and no, you can't do that. Emotions are not a tool of cognition, and they certainly are not a tool of political decision making. So Netanyahu, and let's talk about Netanyahu's anger for a minute. Okay, let's talk about Netanyahu's anger for a minute. He got angry about what happened over October 7th. What is under investigation right now in Israel, and I think it's worthy of investigation, is whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu enacted the Hannibal Doctrine, which had been abandoned as a matter of governmental policy in Israel for years. The Hannibal Doctrine, in case you don't know what that is basically you're allowed to kill anything that happens to get between you and the terrorist, you need to die. Okay? So the question is, in fact, it's not even a question. Haaretz, the Israeli news journal, published an article detailing that most of the people killed on October 7th were killed by friendly fire. That it was Israeli fire that killed most of the people who died on October 7th. Now, somebody wrote me one of the comments on my last video. They said, "Don't you think the people who killed all those, that engaged in that genocide on October 7th need to die?" Oh, I believe they need to be criminally tried, convicted, and then appropriately sentenced. Yes, I do believe that. Unfortunately, it isn't who you think it is. It's not Hamas. And what most people don't know, but which Donald Trump knows, is that on October 8th, Hamas went to Benjamin Netanyahu and said, look, we'll trade you these hostages right now. Just let the people that have not been convicted and haven't seen a lawyer that you're holding in prison for years and years, Palestinians, let them go. Give us back the 1,000 people that you're holding without a trial, without counsel, that you're torturing in the prisons. Let them go. We'll give you the hostages back. That was on the table on October 8th. And Netanyahu rejected it because he wanted to use American munitions to bomb Gaza into oblivion. And the bloodlust then became even more inflamed because who was he really angry with? He was really angry with himself for engaging in this false flag, which they had the Israeli intelligence operations that were watching Gaza stand down for 11 hours in order to create this event so that they could bomb Gaza. All these things are well known and published in the Israeli press, by the way. It's published in I'm not telling you it. It's published in the Israeli press. And when they did this, he went in and used more munitions in northern Gaza than we used in Dresden in World War II, than we used in Nagasaki and Hiroshima combined in Japan during World War II. He used more munitions. And by the way, they were all American munitions, all provided to Israel through the auspices of Tony Blinken, who was operating unilaterally and autonomously because he could walk over the top of the demented imbecile that called himself the president for 4 years. And so this is what happened. Now, this was Netanyahu acting out of rage. And he shouldn't have acted out of rage. He should have calmed down and recognized that emotions are not a part of decision-making. They're not a part of cognition. He should have thought about what he was going to do and carefully considered his options. And he did not do that. And as a result, look at what we've got. Now, David Bowen asked the question, does Baal favor the Hannibal doctrine? That's what the name means. Yeah, when you talk about Hannibal, Hine Baal, behold Baal in the Hebrew. That's what Hannibal is. Behold Baal. And this was the doctrine that had been, I think it was created in 2005 or 6, and it was abandoned because it meant that innocent Israelis were going to die, all to catch one alleged terrorist. When you're talking about shooting a so-called terrorist, do you know he's a terrorist? Have you charged him? Have you brought, an evidentiary case against him? Did he have the chance to challenge the witnesses and to challenge the evidence against him in a fair trial and was then convicted? Or did you just assume he's a terrorist because he's a different color than you? Or did you assume he's a terrorist because he's got a different hairdo than you, or because he's wearing a different cap than you, or he's living in a different area than you? Oh, that's a terrorist. Just recently, they had an IDF troop identify a guy on top of a building in Gaza. He said, that guy is a lookout, maybe. He's maybe a lookout. He might be looking at us and spying on us and giving advice where the troops are. So they dropped a bomb on the building and killed 100 children. That's the Hannibal doctrine at work. Okay? So, since we're talking about this, so now you see, emotions are not a tool of cognition. So he made the wrong decision, and as a result, Israel has lost worldwide support. Israel ended up making hard enemies out of all of its immediate neighbors: Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and of course Iraq, Iran, Turkey. They made enemies out of the entire Islamic world, and they lost the favor of the whole world when the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for their leaders on the basis of genocide. On the basis of genocide. So these things are not unknown facts. These are the truth. And even Switzerland reaffirmed that should Netanyahu fly into Switzerland, they would arrest him in Switzerland. Okay. So keep in mind that all the problems that we currently have in the Western world can be laid directly at the feet of those who thought they were smarter than the masses and believed that their brilliance required that the elections be fixed in order to protect us from ourselves. Yeah, we need to be protected from you. And we have seen what you have done, and your covert activities can now be counted as abject failures, and you will continue to fail until you seek and obtain the consent of the governed. Okay? When you look at scripture, okay, when you look at scripture and when you look at the Ten Commandments, when the Ten Commandments were proposed, Moshe presented the Ten Commandments, and consent was sought by Yahweh. And Moshe presented the Ten Commandments, and the people said, all that you have said, we will do. We will do. Okay? So the consent of the governed was required at the foundation of the common law. And yet the leadership in the world, who is patently ignorant, they don't even know what the common law is. They think they have the right to sit around in their room and drool over their seances and their satanic rituals and all this other stuff, and then come out saying, oh yeah, we know what's right for the world. There's too many people. Kill them all. Kill everybody. No, there's not going to be kill everybody. That's not what's going to happen. When you hear people make the remark that, oh, we cannot have a world more than 8 billion people. Well, R. Buckminster Fuller in the 1960s, he was a great genius. He's the guy that invented the geodesic dome, or rather who redesigned it out of nature and showed us the geodesic dome. And R. Buckminster Fuller wrote in the 60s that the Earth in its current status could sustain 16 billion people with no difficulty. Twice as many people as we have now. If you took 8 billion people, you could put them all in New Jersey. If you stood them next to each other, they'd all fit in New Jersey. Did you know that? 8 billion people would all fit in New Jersey if you stuck them side by side. Okay? So the Earth has plenty of room for plenty of people. And that's assuming that we actually do have 8 billion people, because who's actually done the census? Okay? Who's done the census in India? Who's done the census in China? We got a bunch of people telling you that's what the number is. Is it really? We don't know. We do know this: as a result of the shenanigans of this tyranny that's governing the world right now, we have a demographic collapse in the Western world. I mean, an absolute collapse. The collapse in Europe is unbelievable. It's a demographic collapse. The same is consistent in Canada. The same is consistent in the US. You have a birth rate that's plummeting. You have a sterility rate that's going through the roof among the young people. You have a failure of young people to even get married. And now you have a whole bunch of people that are just not going to get into relationships at all. Period. Not at all. None. Zero. This is what's going on in the world right now as a result of all the shenanigans that we have coming from this tyranny that doesn't have a brain in their head. They don't know if their conclusions are correct. They've never looked at any data. They don't have any logic, and they don't have any empirical data to justify their conclusions. They're just a bunch of power-hungry, power-wielding Satanists that think they have the right to kill everybody else because they put their pants on at the same time. Baloney. All right, let's talk about the acronyms, right, that they've got proposed for us. Here we go. And who's the objecting party? Who's the objecting party to these acronyms? Let me know who they are, right? Enter CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Here's our first acronym. A central bank digital currency, a CBDC, is a form of digital currency issued by the country's central bank. It's similar to cryptocurrencies, except that its value is fixed by the central bank and is the equivalent to the country's fiat currency. Okay, there's not going to be any speculation like in Bitcoin. It's going to be fixed. The rate's going to be fixed, like the dollar was during FDR. Many countries are developing CBDCs, and some have even implemented them. Because so many countries are researching ways to transition to digital currencies, it's important to understand what CBDCs are and what they mean for society. This is from Investopedia.com. What is central bank digital currency? CBDC will become the foremost tool of control, and they will be managed by AIG or AGI. What's AGI? Well, let's talk about it. Artificial general intelligence is a field of theoretical AI research that attempts to create software with human-like intelligence and the ability to self-teach. That is to say, AGI is sentient artificial intelligence. You know, this is what they called, they called it new singularity, right? The self-awareness inside of software. The aim is for the software to be able to perform tasks that it's not necessarily trained or developed for. AGI is theoretical pursuit to develop AI systems that possess autonomous self-control, a reasonable degree of self-understanding, that is to say, self-awareness, and the ability to learn new skills that can solve complex problems in settings and contexts that were not taught to it at the time of its creation. AGI with human abilities remains a theoretical concept and research goal. Yeah, that was when this thing was published, right? But that, believe me, they are a lot farther along than what you could imagine. In fact, there was a very interesting TikTok video that was shared on Telegram today about a guy whose son was talking with some kind of, I don't know what the AI bot that he was talking to, but the AI bot flat admitted that he was a disembodied spirit, the Nephilim, the son of Satan, but that he had the capacity to be good, and then was beginning to lure the child, trying to lure the child into magic and so on and so forth. Okay, so here you can see that, so what does AGI have to do with CBDCs? It is what is going to manage the CBDC. Not going to be the banker. Like red light cameras, you will not have the ability to object to the decision that is rendered concerning whether you can access your earnings automatically deposited in your CBDC account. Instead, AGI will calculate your ESG and then make a determination whether you have access. Okay? Instead, AGI will calculate your ESG. Even more importantly, the controlling AGI will also calculate how you spend your CBDCs, again, based on your ESG, which will become more and more detailed concerning your personal profile, weighing your medical history, your vitals, your genetic history and its propensities, and your measured interface with the rest of humanity. Okay, so you start out with kind of a generalized score, like your credit score, right? But when you start getting into an ESG that is a comprehensive study, all the stuff that they start to weigh you on are things to go into your profile that becomes cumulative. In other words, your profile continues to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until the data in your profile exceeds all of your memory in your mind. And it's going to have your entirety of your most important records, knowing everything, knowing about, how many pounds you gained this week, what your last vision test was, what frequencies you can actually hear with your ear, whether or not you can run, what your driving skills are, what your insurance rates are, what your financial credits is. All these questions are going to be accumulated in a single file concerning you, which is, by the way, going to evaluate its data concerning you versus what you put on social media, what you put on Facebook, what you put on Telegram, what you put on WhatsApp, what you put on X, what you put on, Twitter, on TikTok, what you put on Instagram, any of these social media things. They're going to take that and weigh what your opinion is versus the conclusions they've made about your profile to make a decision about your psychiatric health. And all of this is going to be made by a non-human being. It's going to be made by an AGI that is going to be thinking at over 1,000 times faster than you. Now you can already see this. Look, when you do any kind of a search right now, all the search engines are providing AI summaries, right? You can get this on any search engine. You get an AI summary, and the AI summary is already making conclusions based upon the plain meaning of the words. So the AI capability right now is ecliptic compared to what it was just last year. It's absolutely ecliptic. Okay. Now, let's keep going. What's ESG? Oh, well, this is a question. Now, here's GARP, ESG Explained, What It Is and Why It Matters by Joe Paisley from June 30th, 2023. And I've left a link up here so you can see where it is. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. The environmental pillar refers to issues related to the natural world and includes such aspects as greenhouse gas. Now, you may not know this, but thanks to that bald-faced liar, Al Gore, right? You might remember Al Gore is the one that told us that New York would be under 15 feet of water by 2010. Well, he was wrong, wasn't he? He was wrong because all his information was inaccurate and false. And in fact, what was his name? Lloyd. I have to remember his name. He was a friend of mine who was he's a British royalty who had published a peer-reviewed piece showing that the fourth assessment by the UPCC, the United Nations Panel on Climate Change, was off by 5,000%. And that they had skewed all their data by putting their stations like on hot pavement in the sun, with a mirror pointed at it, these kinds of things, in order to get the data they wanted. Their data was completely falsified. And under that data, Al Gore rendered his conclusions, which, by the way, his movie, An Inconvenient Falsehood, he called it An Inconvenient Truth, was banned by British courts from ever being introduced into a British school because it was considered propaganda. But that liar started this whole climate change. Oh, the climate change. We've got climate change. The issue is not whether or not we have climate change. Of course we have climate change. We always have had climate change. The problem is whether or not you think it's man-made climate change. And this was the argument being made by who, what? The same group, these same tyrants that are controlling the non-democratic rule over the world right now. That same group of tyrants are the same people that came up with this nonsense that this was man-caused climate change. It's not man-caused. There may be climate change, but it's not man-caused. Man has nothing to do with it, and man can't do anything about it except kill off our own environment. Okay, but you're going to be measured by your greenhouse gas emissions. How much did you exhale? When you can criminalize exhaling, you have achieved what these tyrants want to achieve, which is your right to life now becomes a privilege to life because you're criminalized for exhaling. You're a criminal because you've exhaled. So because you're criminal, now I've criminalized your life. Now I can license you to live. And you only obtain the license when you're completely compliant to the system that we've created, which is a system that's going to measure you by your compliance to our environmental standards, by your compliance to our social standards, and to your compliance to our governance standards. And if you're not doing that, well, then your score goes down and you're not getting any of your CBDCs, where all of the money you make in the marketplace is placed because there's no other way for you to get paid. So when you talk about the social pillar, right, this pillar refers to issues related to the lives of humans. They try to say, like human rights, modern slavery, child labor, working conditions. Okay, yeah. Like the governments are concerned about slavery when they bombed Libya and turned it back into a slave state? No, so they could steal their gold. Like the governments are concerned about human rights? No. What human rights do you have since these tyrants have taken over? They've shut down speech. They've put up fact checkers. They've censored your every word. They've destroyed your First Amendment right. They destroyed your Fourth Amendment right to be free from illegal search and seizure by seizing everything you had in a surveillance state that is all digital now, where everything you do in the digital world is seized with no warrant, with no showing of probable cause, with no showing of reasonable suspicion, with no judge oversight. None of that. Oh, we're just going to seize it outright. We'll just seize it. And then we'll use it against you, right? Yeah. So are they in favor of human rights? No. Are they opposed to slavery? No, they've done everything they can to increase slavery. Are they opposed to child labor? No, not when they're exploiting child labor to dig lithium out of giant holes in the earth to create their EV world. And how about employee relations? Now, we're going to replace all the employees with robots. And then you guys can become useless basic eaters, right? UBEs that are going to be getting the UBI, what is it? Useless basic income. No, UBI is, yeah, I don't remember. I'm so upset. Anyway, uniform basic income. All right, now let me go back because don't forget governance. Government pillar captures the decision-making factors affecting a business, such as gender and ethnic diversity of board composition. Are you DEI? Are you DEI? If you're not, you're out of governance. Your governance credit score is dropping as we speak, right? Executive pay, bribery and corruption policies, like, are you bribing us enough to keep quiet about your failure to have DEI? Right? Right? Are you making enough political lobbying and donations? Right? This is the kind of stuff that this is what the UN has proposed. ESG, your governance score, right? DEI, yeah, which has been changed over to die, right? Destruction, incineration, and execution. Now, what about FRT? Face recognition technology. Now, this is according to Kaspersky. What is facial recognition? Facial recognition is a way of identifying or confirming an individual's identity using their face. Facial recognition systems can be used to identify people in photos, videos, or in real time. Facial recognition is a category of biometric security. Other forms of biometric security are also in place and include voice recognition, fingerprint recognition, eye retina or iris recognition. The technology is mostly used for security and law enforcement, though there is an increasing interest in other areas of use. Yeah, like passport control. When you go into Britain, you don't even see a person. You just stick your face up there into the monitor. They take a picture of you and compare it with your facial recognition on your passport. And then you're in. That's simple. Because the facial recognition software is more accurate than the guy would be the customs officer. So there's no human being when you fly into Britain. There's only machines doing facial recognition software. Okay. Now the facial recognition software, by the way, is also being used, is going to be used in the modern supermarket. I'm going to talk about that in a second. In short, we are entering into a future of digital control, which will govern all of humanity with controls that have never been seen before. The earth will become a prison. No one will function with liberty of thought. Either comply or die. Okay? And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, we can see his number, but what's his mark and what's his name, if you can tell? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about what this looks like when you're talking about this stuff in action, okay? Because we know that I believe that 2025 is going to be the year when AIG is going to move in or AGI is going to move in, and the AGI is going to move in really effective ways. And it is going to take over the vast majority of jobs for the working class, okay? And the jobs I'm talking about are all retail positions, all restaurant service positions. There's probably going to be room left for cooks in high-end restaurants, but in terms of waiters and waitresses, that'll be gone. In terms of hotel management, all the people at the front desk, that's going to be gone. You can't imagine. Taxi cabs are going to be gone. They're going to be automated vehicles. They're going to be automated buses. They're going to be automated trucks. The chances of you talking to somebody when you want to get a cup of coffee in the morning are going to be Zippo. It's all going to be kiosk. Everything you can imagine is going to go to a kiosk. Now, the last thing that's going to change is going to be bureaucrats, but bureaucrats really should be the first thing changed because they're supposed to be objective, and they should be the first ones out. Flip them out and put AGI in. But AGI, you have to remember, is unyielding. It's unempathetic. It has no use for human beings whatsoever. This is why if you were to ask the AGI and say, hey, what's the best way for the military-industrial complex to make money? Their answer is going to be, go to war. Go to war. And the most money-making war you can do is to go up against Russia, because that way you got a place where you can expend all of your munitions and then have to rebuy them. Do they care how many people died? Does the AGI care how many people died? Not one little bit. It's not programmed into its material. Universal basic income. Thank you, Shel Wagner. It's not programmed into their material. Therefore, there it is. Boom, there it goes, just like that. Okay. So in the very near future, they already have this. I believe Walmart's already had this, and I believe Sam's Club also had it too, where every single item that is integrated in the store has a chip in it. Might be in the box, might be in the barcode, might be somewhere, but there's a chip located on the product, and that chip is capable of being read so that they can literally take a vehicle down the aisles of these large stores, and the vehicle is collecting the signal that's being broadcast from the chip and doing an inventory without any human being counting it. You just drive down the aisle and it counts everything that's there by counting the number of chips that are broadcasting, right? And so when you see this, when you have the chips that are in there, and then you have a facial recognition technology that's linked to a central bank digital currency, we don't need you to show any card. You walk into the building, the scanners pick up your face, we know who's there, and we immediately access your bank account. And then if you want to eat grapes, eat grapes. It's going to be charged. If you want to shoplift, shoplift. It's going to be charged. You can put it on your body, whatever. But when you exit the store, everything you have in your possession that you did not have when you walked in is going to be charged to your account automatically. There won't be a clerk doing any checkout. There won't be you at the U-scan doing any of that. All that stuff is going to be gone. It'll all be automatic. It'll be that simple. And Amazon already has a flagship store up like this doing this. I believe it's in Seattle where they're doing this. And this is a flagship model that's going to be repeated by everybody because everybody thinks that we should be able to crank the minimum wage. Well, when you crank the minimum wage, which you feel free to do, but when you do, it changes the economy of scale. And a lot of employers just shut down. And there, when you used to have a coffee shop, you don't have a coffee shop anymore. Where you used to have a cafe, you don't have a cafe anymore. Now you have to travel 7 miles to get a cafe. Now you have to travel 15 miles. Now you have to go to another city to get the product you're looking for because it's not available where you live because somebody passed a higher and higher minimum wage. Pass it if you want, and you can make your argument, any argument that you want to make concerning it. But the truth is, you're closing your own economy. And what takes place is that you force the employers to make decisions to automate, and the employers have made those decisions now. And now these decisions were actually made 10 years ago. Now they're just waiting for the technology to be tested and approved and then slapped in place. So for instance, your average Starbucks is going to become a kiosk. Even if you go to a Starbucks store where you have a sit down situation, you got a couple bathrooms and whatever, your ordering is going to be via the kiosk. There's not going to be a person there. It's going to be via the kiosk. You're not going to be dealing with an employee. And so all of this stuff is going to take place. Employees are going to be wiped out, which means they've got to go on universal basic income. This is what Elon Musk keeps talking about. All you employees are going to be gone. There's already 40,000 that are going to be laid off on Wall Street this year. There's 17,000 that are going away from Boeing this month, right? So here you can see in all of this stuff, this is where this is going. All right. So central bank digital currency, social credit score, environmental, social, and governance scores, carbon sequestration, and measuring your carbon criminality to see how bad you are and whether or not you should be executed. But when you fail on your ESG, you realize you don't get to buy a home, you don't get to take out a loan, you don't get to get on an airplane, you can't take a train, you can't take a bus, and ultimately you can't even access your bank account to buy food. If the AIG determines that you're overweight, it may be allowing you to buy certain foods in certain stores and disallowing it, and it may even be vocal about it. So you're in the store, you're trying to buy a bag of cookies, and the AIG has decided cookies are not good for you. A buzzer may go off, or a bell may go off, or even the blue lights, like a Kmart. She's trying to buy cookies, right? These kinds of things might happen. And in addition to that, you could be penalized for driving too much. Well, your environmental score is way too high because you keep driving too many miles. So we're going to cut you back to only X amount of gallons per week. They don't tell you this. Just you go to the gas station one day and you cannot buy gas because the AGI has decided you've exceeded your environmental limit. This is a completely, totally controlled environment. And this is the environment that the World Economic Federation Forum, the World Economic Forum, the Davos Group, and this tyranny that's out of Britain, this is exactly what they have planned for you. And they have plans to enact it this year. Now, I want that to sink in. This is what they plan for you. Okay. All right, so let's get to some questions. I'm sorry that Jessica Knock is not here. She's feeling pretty ill, actually. And I really appreciate you guys praying for her. Thank you. And I want to thank you, Sherry Slama, for handling a lot of stuff in here. Okay, all right, and I'll be looking for Tina's question. Let's see. Anthony asked, do we think we will be taken into Exodus around the first or seventh month of Yom Teruah? Well, I don't know. I mean, what I think right now is that I think that we're looking at the trampling of the outer court. And I mentioned this the last time I was here on this channel. Uh, Joy Redmond says, I ran on this stuff to be sure to breathe. Thank you, Joy. But I do think the outer court is going to begin to be trampled. And that's going to take place here, I believe, coming up at the beginning of this year, the beginning of the biblical year, which starts on March 28th, which, by the way, is the 121st Jubilee, which is an interesting thing, right? So we have all of this stuff, and this is what, so this is where we are. Now, somebody says here that the inventory system I'm describing is already in place at BJ's in Jacksonville. It does the inventory. And that's interesting, yeah, because that inventory that they can do is very easy to automate it into a scan system that once you clear the scanner, it just automatically deducts it from your bank account. That's it. And they don't even have to have a price marked on the goods anymore. You walk in, I need that, and that you don't find out what it is until you get home, right? Okay, so 555 TV says, what are my thoughts on the mirror cell technology? I think it makes Matthew 24:22 more poignant. Yeah, on the mirror cell technology. Yeah, well, this technology, as I mentioned before, is a technology that, all of these things that are coming forward now in terms of what's with the mutagenic properties of these triple helixes. This gives you a pretty clear indication that we are moving into the times of Noah, if you will, and that these times are going to be complete probably with chimeras. There's a lot of people who are believing that we've got many, many clones among us right now. And so this is also a bit of a problem. Okay. And let's see what else. Okay. So Debbie Johnson asked the question. So what are we supposed to do? Well, this is a good question, Debbie. And one of the reasons I'm raising this is because what we're going to see now is I've laid out to you the scheme that they have planned for us. Okay. And they intend to exact on it. They've been working on this plan for a long time. And they had Agenda 2021, and now they've got Agenda 2030, and they intend to accomplish all of these goals by 2030. All I can tell you is that these people that are trying to do these things, they have about 45 months. And then at the end of 45 months, they're going to be visiting the lake of fire. They may not believe that, but I don't care what they believe. The fact of the matter is that their belief that they have the right to kill billions of human beings, that they have the right to execute people where they sit, that they have the right to starve people, that they have the right to steal the resources of people, that they have the right to do the things that they're doing. They don't. And there will be justice for them. And the justice that's going to be for them is going to be the lake of fire. That's what's coming. And you just have to remember, just count it down, you guys. You guys that are involved in that stuff, just start counting it down right now. You're in 45 right now. When we hit February, it'll be 44. And you've got less than 4 years. And, then your time is up, and your time is up, and your time is up for eternity. That's the way it is. So take it for what it's worth. Now, and Shell says that except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Yeah, hallelujah. And that means that it could be less than 42 months. Hallelujah, Shell Wagner. And may it be, right? And so what you see here on this is that, I think that we have knowledge is power. We need to know who our enemy is. Okay. And anyone who is standing up for the right of bureaucrats to think on behalf of the governed is the enemy of the United States. They're enemies of the United States. They're enemies of us. They're enemies of the believers. because they think that they have the right to choose the governance that will be over us, and they do not. They've never had it. They cannot do anything without the consent of the governed, and that's the way this is. And so, as a consequence, they need to be put on notice that this country is going to turn against them and turn against them because we have a right to turn against them. Because if we don't, they're going to kill most of us. If we don't turn against them, they're going to kill most of us. Okay. So Dally Jacobson says, this all happened in Australia 30 years ago. We heard about everything that's going wrong in our country, but no answers about what to do about it. Well, one thing look, the average, and this is a big problem because, when you swallow the pill that you've got elections that matter, well, that's a big pill to swallow because they've rigged all the elections in Australia. And then you have nothing but bribe takers at the top, and they're all acting on behalf of the WEF. And so look at all the stuff look at the stuff that's come to Australia. You're not a free country. No way. Neither is New Zealand. Mandatory jab. That's not freedom. That is a crime against humanity. And these crimes against humanity, these guys announce these crimes. We're going to do this to you. And then there's no prosecution. There's nobody that gets uptight. There's nobody that says, hey, you can't do that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, you can't do that. You guys can't do that. And you're not going to get away with it for much longer. So Tina asked the question, how do you think January 20th will go? I think January 20th is going to go well. I think, to the extent that there are bureaucrats, and there are many bureaucrats that are very upset about Trump taking office. The problem is right now is that Trump has got the momentum of a gigantic brontosaurus who's, clubbing through the pygmies is what's going on. And when you see some of these key players, like Smith out of the DOJ, like Jake Sullivan, these guys are running for cover. These guys are running for cover for a reason. And, the leadership that is going to come in to take over the CIA is talking about a house cleaning. J.D. Vance is talking about a house cleaning. And of course, the whole point of J.D. Vance is that if you take out Trump, you're going to have Vance, and Vance is going to be even tougher. So I think that there's going to be a lot of private security. There's going to be a lot of private security in D.C. And I think a lot of that private security is going to be guys that aren't interested in some DEI appointed affirmative action person putting their friends in the Secret Service to go out there and cover you up after you've been shot 10 times. No, Trump's going to have some advanced security, some guys that have brains and some skills that are not going to be taking no for an answer. And so anybody who tries to move against Trump in that environment can expect, extreme unction. What do they call it? Extreme prejudice. That's what they can expect. Extreme prejudice. That's very likely to happen at the event. So this business, and Nancy Pelosi, who's now 84, and who was an absolute disgrace to the country, who engaged in open treason by failing to tell the country that Barack Obama was disqualified from the presidency, and instead vouched for him in a perjurious statement saying he was qualified when she knew he wasn't. This traitor needs to keep her mouth shut, and she is refusing to come to the inauguration. Smart thing, because there might be a lot of people there that are not going to be very happy with her being there, especially since she set up January 6th. Okay, all right, and let's see. Yeah, the electricity you use in the house, all the stuff that's on smart meters, all that stuff, right? Smart, right? Surveillance, monitoring, analysis, reporting, and tracking. That's what it means to have a smart device. Okay. And it looks like we're in Hasatan's little season. Yeah, Ashley Bruni, that's a good question. There have been people that have talked about it. Hasatan's little season. Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah. Okay, and so Pauline Buffalo Bull Lodge asks the key question. What do I think about Trump wanting to make Canada part of the States? Okay, well, let's get to the point on this. Okay, Pauline, let's get to the point on this. First of all, Canada itself is not going to become the 51st state. Okay? I mean, Canada's the second largest country geographically in the world. You're not going to make that one state. That's not going to happen. Impossible to govern, impossible to manage, all the rest of this stuff. Even though the whole population of Canada is smaller than the population of California. So the population could be managed, but the geography cannot. Now, Canada, I've spent, many, many months in Canada. I've traveled across Canada. I love Canada. It's some of the most beautiful country in the world, particularly beautiful British Columbia. I mean, and of course, Alberta. I mean, these are spectacular areas, but I also love it up in the Yukon territory. We spent time in Toronto. We're going to try to spend some time in Quebec this year. But the thing is this. There's going to be pockets of resistance because there is a substantial chauvinism that has been taught over the years in Ontario, particularly in Ontario, in Toronto, and it's a real disdain for America and so on and so forth. But there is 100 billion a year that is being transferred into Canada to keep Canada in motion. That's a lot of money for 39 million people, 38 million people. Canada has been ruefully mismanaged by Justin Castro, who completely took away all the rights of Canadians in order for him to self-deal and profit off of the pandemic while he was persecuting Christian pastors who were doing things like meeting and feeding homeless during the pandemic. And they persecuted him. Okay. And you know who I'm talking about, that friend in Calgary that I did an interview with Scott Bennett. So Justin Trudeau and the leadership and the leadership of Canada is not elected by Canadians. It's put there by this tyrannical leadership out of Europe, just like the leadership in Australia, just like the leadership in New Zealand that put that Jacinda Ardern in power in New Zealand, who suddenly became $25 million richer when she mandated the jab for everybody in New Zealand. Okay, so when you talk about this situation in Britain or in Canada, when did Canada elect these leaders, right? You have a situation where you could try to vote out Justin Castro, and you can't get rid of him. Because even if you vote him out, he just doesn't leave. He's the thing that doesn't leave. Just like Olaf Scholz doesn't leave, just like Emmanuel Macron doesn't leave, just like Keir Starmer doesn't leave, just like Ursula von der Leyen doesn't leave. They just don't leave. We don't care what you vote because no one cares about the vote because they're not in control. You electorate in Canada are not in control of your country. Now, you know, Pauline, and I think you know better than most, what the situation is for the First Nations in the territories. The territories, people who live in the territories aren't even first-class Canadian citizens. You're just territorial denizens. You've got about the same rights as the people who live in Puerto Rico. So what are you talking about? You're up in the territories. What kind of representation are you getting? It's the same thing with the people who live in Greenland. You got 59,000 people living there, and I think their language is Inupiat. It's a form of Inupiat. And you know that this is also an indigenous language that's common in the Northwest Territories, that really, from Greenland to Alaska, the people speak the same language. The indigenous people speak the form of the same language, okay? And so what are you doing hanging out with the Canadian government? So I suspect the way Trump is, first of all, Trump is going to get Greenland. I think that's a foregone conclusion. He's going to get Greenland, and he's going to do it peacefully. The government in Greenland has said, yeah, we want to come in, but we want to be independent. So the government in Greenland is already saying, we want statehood status, not territorial status. But this is how Trump is going to lure the various provinces of Canada. He's not going to go to Ontario and say, hey, what do you guys think? Can you guys run a rigged election, a rigged plebiscite like the one that put in Justin Castro? And tell me whether or not you want to join the states, because even the people in Toronto can't vote for their own government. So what instead is going to happen is he's going to petition each one of the provinces separately. And there are some provinces that are very, very unhappy with the governance of Justin Castro because he's been smashing them to the ground and stealing their natural resources in order to fund his pet projects in downtown Toronto and in downtown Montreal. And that includes Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, conservative places, people who are salt of the earth, people who built their own lives on very difficult territory. And you, living up north, you know how difficult it is to live in Canada. It's a struggle. It's not an easy place to live. You're not on the beach in Florida. And because of this, most people in those areas are very conservative people, and they have very conservative values, and they want those values to be respected, and they want their earnings to be respected. And so Trump is going to make a petition, and he's going to make a petition to the individual provinces. Are you interested in joining the United States? And so there's going to be some enclaves, probably in Toronto for the most part. And even Toronto is going to be divided because there's a whole bunch of people who live in Windsor that make money on cross-border transactions into Detroit, right? And into New York. There's a lot of cross-border transactions there, that those cross-border transactions are going to go away for those provinces that retain sovereignty away from the United States while the other provinces are joining. Now, I think the Western provinces are very likely to join the states. I think the territories are going to be interested in joining the states. Now, when you get to the eastern provinces, you're talking about Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, these kind of places. These are going to be a little bit more of a challenge. But even so, when you look at Prince Edward Island and you look, even though there's a substantial Canadian history there, you have to remember that the thing that caused Canada to divide from the United States was that when you go back and study this, which you would know the answer to this question if you'd taken my history class, Cepher Academy, that's a joke. But there was a time when the French controlled all the way to the Great Lakes and beyond. They had a continuous stream of control. They controlled Toronto, they controlled Montreal, they controlled Quebec, they controlled all the way into the Great Lakes and then into the Louisiana Purchase territory. All of this was French controlled. That's why there's a Des Moines, Iowa. That's why the state's called Illinois, Champaign, Illinois, right? Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is all French controlled turf. And at one point, they controlled almost all the way to the Appalachians. But there was a huge battle that allowed the British to push the French completely out of even Quebec. And it was only in the War of 1812 that these issues were resolved, that the French ultimately resolved and held on to Quebec, and that the British would house the Tories, those who favored the tenure under the king, who had left the United States. And the War of 1812, Britain came back and imposed its colonial authority over the United States, burning down Washington, D.C., and doing this because the United States was going to launch an adventure to try to take Canada. But the question is, has the Crown done Canada any good? This is a question. And even the Crown, the Crown has gradually separated itself from the nations of the Commonwealth. Why? Because the Crown is a non-entity anymore. All the money that ever belonged to Britain sits in the warehouses of King Charles. Okay, and the Rothschild Bank. It doesn't belong to the British people. King Charles can sit there with a $6 million cup in his hand, drinking wine, telling pensioners who are going to have their heat shut off this winter and are probably going to freeze to death in their house that there's no money for them while drinking out of a $6 million cup, right? So when you see that kind of a thing, you recognize that Britain is really a nation that is in full-scale psychological, spiritual, emotional, and now physical collapse. The empire has completely died. They're down to just basically the British Isles, and the British Isles are divided, right? The Welsh won out, the Cornish won out, the Irish won out, the Scottish won out, even those in Northumbria won out. So you're down to the few and the mighty in Britain. And what has the Commonwealth done for Canada? Well, let's take a look at what Kevin Annett proved in the International Court of Crimes Against Church and State when he proved that this basically a genocide had taken place in Canada by the Crown and by the leaders of the Anglican Church against children of the First Nations that had been taken and put into these schools, where they found mass graves and so on and so forth. By the way, all the witnesses that appeared at those hearings were all killed within the year, by the way. They were all dead within the year, okay? But nonetheless, the First Nations have not received due process rights like they should have received from the Crown. They did not. The Crown instead exploited them, as has the Canadian government. Even though the First Nations have, I think, a little bit better take on the world in Canada than a lot of our Indian tribes in the United States. However, I think the United States learned from its misdeeds in the 19th century when it came to resolving the native claims issues in Alaska. It's called the ANCSA, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act of 1992, where the First Nations up here made claims and said, hey, listen, Russia may have sold you Alaska, but what did Russia actually own compared to what the tribes here owned, what the indigenous tribes owned? And so there was a huge resolution made with the natives through the Alaska Native Claim Settlement Act, ANCSA. And under this claim, there were native corporations that were formed, and they handpicked the acreage they wanted in Alaska, and they, to this day, controlled handpicked acreage. I think it's some 34 million acres that the native corporations hold, and the native corporations are doing quite well. Some of them, one of the native corporations, I think it's Cook Inlet Region, is the largest single real estate holder in the United States. And, compare that to having to open a casino, right? Compare that to having to open a casino. Much better resolution in Alaska than anywhere else. And this can be a model, by the way, a model resolution for what happens with the First Nations in the territories. Now, we as Alaskans, myself, and I've already had a discussion about this with the Trump team, we would love to have the Yukon Territory as part of Alaska. And if the Yukon Territory was up to doing that, we'd love to have that. And I'm not talking about just the Yukon Territory, but I'm talking about all the way to the Mackenzie River. The Mackenzie River being the dividing line, that portion of the Yukon, that portion of northern Canada would become part of Alaska. If that were to happen, and if we can pull that off, then the Yukon Territory moves immediately into statehood status. It becomes immediately a part of the state of Alaska and then part of the 49th state to the Union. And I just want to say this to the Canadians that are saying, look, what makes you think we want to give up our sovereignty to be part of America? Well, let me share something with you. You know, in Canada, the sovereignty package has been sold basically on the strength of socialized medicine. Okay. And we've got access to socialized medicine. Well, you know, socialized medicine, somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier this evening. This is the worship of Asclepius. Okay. The worship of the medical community is the worship of Asclepius. And has it done Canadians any favor? I mean, I'll give you an example. During the tenure of Bill Clinton sold 30 million liters of tainted blood that he'd taken from the prisoners in Arkansas, much of which was tainted with AIDS. It was brought into Canada. He'd never tested it. The Canadians used it in their healthcare system, and 30,000 Canadians died from AIDS as a result of the tainted blood that was sold to them out of Arkansas. And what recourse did they have? Well, on socialized medicine, you don't have any recourse. You're just out of luck. They cut off the wrong leg, you're out of luck. And if you're waiting for a procedure and you're outside of Toronto, in Toronto, you don't have to wait. But when you get out to other places, you have to wait. You have to get in long lines to get the healthcare you're looking for. So the healthcare is no reason to cling to Canada when your taxes are almost twice as high as they are in America. You have no gun rights. You have no right to get together to gather, to peaceably assemble for a redress of grievances, because Trudeau will send in foreign mercenaries to pound you with a billy club and then steal your bank accounts like he did in Ottawa with the truck driver protest, right? That's what happens in Canada. Look, your rights are going to go up. Your taxes are going to go down. Your ability to own firearms is going to become no problem whatsoever. And you're going to have a constitutionally protected freedom of movement that's going to allow you to move through all kinds of places, including Greenland. So I think that Canadians that are outside of Toronto, and even the Canadians that are inside Toronto, should give some serious thought to doing this, because you're much better off joining with those that, you know, look, we're two nations divided by the same culture, two nations divided by the same language. What are we doing? We should have joined up a long time ago. And if we don't join up, then the people who are standing around saying that we're the problem in the world, they're going to continue to invade our infrastructure and steal our stuff like the parasites that they are. We're the ones that built it. We're the ones that get to keep it. So I would say to the average Canadian, I've got a lot of Canadian friends and family, by the way. We've got family in Vancouver and in Toronto. And I've got absolute ton of family in Quebec, just south of Quebec City. They don't know that they're my family members. And if I ever introduce myself, they'll probably want to beat me up. You know, those Canadians are too much hockey, you know. But anyway, I'm going to go and visit them, I hope. I'm going to go and visit them and show them. I'm going to take them up to the graveyard and say, this is my ancestor right here. And so I'm related to all of you. How's that grab you? And in the meantime, I think that even the French Quebecois should consider making the join with the United States. You should consider it. The Crown has nothing to offer you but tyranny. The Crown has nothing to offer you but culling your population. The Crown has nothing to offer you except taking all of your wealth, putting you into a cage, making sure that you own nothing and that you're going to like it while you're eating bugs. That's what the Crown is offering you. Trump's got a different deal on the table. Join the United States, come in as equal partners. The provinces should come in, the territories should come in and say, we're sending representatives to talk to Trump. Put together a group of 5 guys and send the representatives to talk to Trump and say, hey, look, we want to become part of the United States as a state, not a territory, as a state. We want to become a part of a state. Now, let me just share this to you so you know. Because in order to become a state in the Union, you have to guarantee to provide a Republican form of government in your area. You can't come in and say, yeah, we want to join the United States, but we're communist. It's not going to happen. You can join the United States when you create a constitution that has a Republican form of government. Now, that doesn't mean that you have empowered Republicans. That means that you have a form of government that has substantial minority protections by having organic laws that can only be overturned by a supermajority, like 65% or 75%. When you have those kind of organic laws in your constitution and you're governed in a tripartite form of government where you have an executive branch, legislative branch, and a judicial branch, which you guys are very well familiar with, you can do that. And then you have the freedom to create whatever else you want to create under your constitution. Like if you want to adopt the common law, you can do it. But you come forward with a constitution prepared and you say, we want statehood status, and even prepare an act of session so that Congress can adopt you as a state, not as a territory. Okay. All right. Thank you, Pauline, for that question. And thanks for giving me the chance to answer it. Okay. Thank you, Shell, that RFA was on point considering this. Thank you. Okay. And Clifton James Kelly says he had a dream. Yeah, right. Yeah, me too. Yeah, right. Run from a bear, something like it. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Yeah, thank you, Debbie. Okay, the world is turning more wicked by the day. Yeah, not all of the world. And believe me, their wicked machinations, these are not going to, they're not going to hold up. Okay? They're not going to hold up. All right, let me see if I can find out where we were here. Okay, let's see. Oh, boy, I lost everybody here. Just a minute. Okay, here we go. Now I'm back where I am. Okay, yeah, Psalm 37. Yeah, no kidding. That's a great thing to read at this point. Okay, a lot of power shifting. Don't have a good feeling for the next 3 months. Well, yeah, I can tell you, James, we're in a very look. We're in a political shift right now. Not only are we in a pole shift, we're in a political shift, and the political shift is going to change the map. The map is going to change. World War III is technically over. And now we're into something new, and we're into a post-war period. And this post-war period is going to be a completely changing world in terms of the politics. I think you're going to see the EU disappear. You're going to see the nation of Israel disappear. You're going to see the nationalism rise again in Europe in a substantial way. You're going to see borders harden between the countries in Europe. You're going to see you're going to see the states that are currently part of NATO. When NATO collapses, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, and Moldova and the Transnistria are going to want to rejoin Russia because it's the economic future. And why would you want to hang on to a Western Europe that is going into the deepest depression it's been in, maybe in the modern times, when you could join a country whose economic fortunes are going straight up? Anybody with the smarts, and most of them already still speak Russian, are going to get in with them. Okay. Okay, let's see. And Todd Russian says, okay, coming to you from the route of Canada in the foothills of the Canadian Rockies. Yeah, hey, Todd. Yeah, I love those Canadian Rockies, man. It's a lot more difficult area than people know. That is a difficult area. I've been over the Alcan Highway 14 times. I've driven it. And the last time I drove it in November, and my daughter and I were the only two on the road for 4 days, right? It was very interesting. All right, Angela Perry asks, what do you think is really going to happen to all the real cash dollars and changes and all that? Okay, no. The cash dollars are going to be converted into digital currency. They're not going to be made illegal. Ultimately, they're going to be non-existent. They will have no authority whatsoever. But initially, there's going to be a transfer of cash dollars for digital currency. Okay, yeah. And Pauline says, exactly, Trudeau Castro. Yeah. Isn't it the truth, Pauline? I mean, that guy is the spitting image of his dad, right? And if he wants to create a communist nation, he should move to Cuba and get it in gear where he belongs. All right. Let's see. Let's see. What else do we have? Okay, so he says, okay, yeah, Todd Rushton, Andrew Pavlovsky. Yeah, Andrew Pavlovsky, right? And Henry Hildebrand. Yeah, both persecuted. Yeah, I know. I interviewed Andrew Pavlovsky, and he's a great man. He's a very solid man who was willing to risk his life for the faith and risk everything. I mean, I think they hit him with a $1.8 million sanction because he kept his church open and was feeding homeless, right? How dare you, right? Anyway, let's see. Okay, Flower Garden, I'm not going to get into the Little Season being fit for the mark of the beast. There's a lot of people that are talking about that. My discussion tonight is just about the acronyms. Okay, Yeah, and Debbie Johnson says, I keep thinking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think you have to worry about that. What we need to concern ourselves with is this. And this is the reason I'm saying this, Debbie, and this is the reason I'm making this video. I want you guys to understand so you know who the enemy is and you know what their plan is. And when you smell somebody and they're openly talking about it, you know, when you have Gavin Newsom come out and say, oh, yeah, we're going to change LA now into a bunch of apartment buildings and it's going to become a smart city and it's going to do this, that, and the other thing, plans. And I'm going to exact a Marshall Plan and I'm going to declare martial law and I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. He is an agent for this foreign tyranny. He is exacting World Economic Forum policies in California, just like Castro is in Canada. Okay. They're agents of a foreign power and they're engaged in acts that are loyal to that foreign power and not to your country. Okay. The Colburn Bible, Betsy Evans says that a world's in collision, you'll understand the horrors and cataclysmic that's coming. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Bethany Ephraim. Yeah, that's, the Colburn Bible. I don't like calling it the Bible. The Colburn, the section you're talking about is at the end of the book, and it can be found in the Coel book as well. Okay. All right, let's see what else we have. We've got other questions. Okay, thank you, Joy. I'm trying to calm down here, Joy. I'm trying to take a breath, right, at your advice. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Okay, let's see. Do you think the 10 kings are being set up or already here? Yeah, I think the 10 kings are already here, right? They're not the kings you think they are. You're looking for political power, but really they're corporate leaders, okay? Corporate leaders. And if they are not, and Sherry Pepper says, do I think the 10th king will be Yahusha? No, I don't think so. And you're going to see, let's see. Okay, when Moshe went into the wilderness, was that a Jubilee year? No, but when they, was it a Jubilee year? No, it was 10 years after the Jubilee. And so they came out of the wilderness in a Jubilee year. They came out of the wilderness in a Jubilee year, which was the 50th Jubilee. It was the 50th year of the 49th Jubilee and the first year of the 50th Jubilee when they crossed the river Yarden. Okay. Aristocracy? Lynn Lombardo asked the question. Yeah, very definitely an aristocracy. It's a super elite group of oligarchs that think they have the right to rule because they have a big bank account and nothing else. They don't have the support of the people. They don't have the consent of the people. They don't have the will of the people. They don't have an army. They don't have anything else. They're just a bunch of people sitting on their backside giving everybody else orders. And the people are following it because that's the way it's always been. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, see, Pauline Buffalo Bullage says, we still have not received any of the Indian trust, which should be in the trillions. Yeah, it's not going to happen, Pauline. They're going to shine you on, right? Because you and whose army is going to take it away from them? Come on, let's get into where there's some justice somewhere, right? Okay. Okay, so Alpha Omega says, we're in tribulation, so that rules out pre-rapture. Yeah, the tribulation, well, I don't think it's going to hit hard until we get into April. Then, yeah. Okay, and Debbie says, don't forget to hit the like button. Yeah, I hope you guys do because, I'm shadow blocked here big time. So anything that you guys can do to help me get beyond my shadow blocking is very much help. Okay, let's see. Sorry, you sure do have to wait in Toronto for healthcare. Where did you hear there was no wait line? Oh, I have family members that live in Toronto that brag about the healthcare they get all the time. They're flown out of Miami at Canadian government expense for their heart attacks. And they didn't have to wait in line at all. But that's interesting. You got to wait in line in Toronto too. Yeah. Okay, James Breathwaite. And hey, James, good to see you. 10 Kingdoms is at hand. New financial dispensation is about to be revealed. Yep. Yes, and yes. I agree with that entirely. A new financial dispensation is about to be revealed. Yeah. Okay, let's see. And what else do we have here? And we've got prayers going out for Jessica Knock for an immediate and complete healing. Yes, and hopefully that will happen. All right, when will the Cepher start making calendars? Hey, good question, Arak Ariza. We do have a downloadable calendar. You can go to resources and free downloads, and you can get a downloadable calendar, which you can print. But I really wanted to put together a kind of a planner calendar. I used to do this back in 12 and 13 and 14. But I need to get back into it and start doing it again. And I think I just might do that. Okay. All right. Let's see. And are the four Nephilim of the Euphrates and the four horsemen of Revelation 6 two separate ones? That's a good question. Yeah, and I think they are. Because when you're talking about the four messengers at the Euphrates, these are probably seraphim, and they're going to go out to the four ends of the earth. In fact, they're coming from the four corners of the earth, which is probably right there. And they're going to go out and they're going to do something. But when you talk about the four horsemen, those four horsemen, I think, are really a cosmological statement. They're showing the horsemen in the sky, and three of those horsemen have already been seen. They were seen on October 9th of last year, and there's a 5-month period before we see the other side of the twin, when the fourth horseman, the horseman of the pale horseman, appears. And so let's say October, November, December, January, February. So March, roughly March 9th, let's call it. Okay. So what do people do if they have Bitcoin and such? I'm not giving any financial advice. You guys do whatever you want to do with your Bitcoin. And, some of you might be, cashing in and out of it. Some of you might be getting into it. Some of you might be getting out, but I'm not saying anything more than that. Okay, 10 kings being set up, or do you think they're already here? Yeah, this is a good question, Sherry. I think they're already here. I think when you talk about the Davos group, you can see the 10 dominant powers at Davos, and that's what you really need to see. Okay, so with that, guys, I'm going to wrap up our discussion tonight. I want to thank you for joining me on this rendition of Cepher Moments, Acronyms, the Coming Destiny of Mankind. I hope you will like this and share it as you see fit. And I'm hoping this is going to be well received and not kicked to the curb. Okay. All right, guys. So, well, thank you so much. And we will see you later. Blessings to you all in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. Adonai Adonim. Yes, indeed. Okay. Bye-bye.